Welcome in this new video in which I'm going to share with you a simple pattern that I use in my projects. You can find an example in the description. It's live on GitHub. And this pattern helps me to centralize error handling for my HTTP handlers. So the issue with native HTTP handlers in Go is that by default, the handlers do not support an error as a return parameter. So if you have written any amount of Go HTTP servers, you probably have something like that, where you handle each potential error differently. And maybe we want to make something smarter, and maybe we want to centralize how I handle errors that can happen in my handlers with different behaviors, right? So we can definitely do that. We can definitely do something smart. Inside of my code base, I came with a simple pattern to handle these use cases. So to make it possible, I created a custom error, which basically wraps the error value inside of a struct, but along with a status code that I want to return in my handler. For example, if I've got some not found error, I want to return 404 error, right? And so I define such a helper. So I've got two helpers, in fact. I've got a constructor function that allows me to create basically any HTTP error that can happen. And then I create a not found error, right? So that is how my struct looks like to define HTTP errors. But for example, I could create even more errors if I want to handle non-HTTP errors. I don't know, it could be anything. It may be even more specific. Well, you can have different custom errors. And then I've got some function inside of my router. So my router just wraps the native HTTP router, right? You can check it out in my code base just a little bit later. And so this function basically makes it possible to handle function, right? To register handle function, but with handlers that have errors, return errors, right? It's definitely something that is possible. And so how I do that? Well, the logic is right here, and it can be way more complex than that. And I have a simple logic where I call the handler, I get back the error, and with the error, I can do plenty of stuff. I can centralize basically my error handling. And so inside of here, I can check that my error is a valid HTTP error. And if it is, I can grab the status code and I can return HTTP error with the status code, right? And I can do even more specific stuff if I want, like if I know that it is a not found page, I could do things like returning an error page, right? I can return specific HTML for this page. Well, it's definitely possible here because I've got the status code inside of here, right? And if it's not an HTTP error, if it's a different error, well, I can fall back to 500, right? I can say it's an internal server error, right? Let's see how it looks like in my code base. So inside of here, I've got a boilerplate containers controller, and it wraps two handlers, right? Just a simple struct. You can ignore this struct and focus on these functions, right? So those are simple HTTP handlers with errors. And if I do things like, I don't know, if I want to return some new error, right? Inside of here, and I can say it's a random error. Well, since it's not an HTTP error with a status code, it will fall back to 500 to internal server error, right? And I can do smarter things. I can make use of my HTTP error stuff, and I can define stuff like it's a bad request, so I can say bad request, you didn't do the right thing, I don't know. And it will be all handled inside of my router, right? Inside of here. And in my router, I can do stuff like if my status code is equal to HTTP not found, so it's basically 404, right? I can do stuff like, I don't know, I can printf stuff to my response writer. I can say h1 not found, right? I can do plenty of smart things inside of here, and it's all centralized inside of my router, right? So I think that's about it for this video. I hope you got the concepts right. I hope it will be useful for you to get this into your code base. And so make sure that you customize the behavior to your own needs, right? If you need to return JSON, you can return JSON. If you need request IDs to identify each request, you are free to do so. We can even do some middlewares that are well aware of these errors, and well, we can make error pages for each error, like we can do a page for bad request, not found, entire server error, unauthorized. We can do anything basically now that we centralized our error handling. So if you need to find the code base, it's in the description. Feel free to turn this into your code base. And that's it for this video. Bye.